Hello friends. In this lesson, we will explore how to apply convolutional neural networks for predictive maintenance using time series data from hydraulic sensors. We will work with the datasets obtained from the UCI repository, specifically focusing on temperature readings from four sensors over multiple cycles. Our goal is to predict the condition of hydraulic components based on these readings, and we will start by pre-processing the data, including loading, normalizing, and reshaping it to fit the model requirements. And we will then build and train CNN to classify the condition of hydraulic components. Finally, we will evaluate the model's performance using various metrics and visualize the results using techniques like TSNE for dimensional reduction. And if you are ready, let's begin. First, let's look at these parts. These parts imports all the necessary libraries and modules. These libraries helps us handle data, visualize it, and pre-process it, and build our neural network model. And let's break down. First, host, random, and ITAR tools. Utility libraries for operating system operations, random generation, and efficient looping, and NumPy and pandas, also matplotlib and scikit-learn, and we will use TensorFlow and Keras. And let's switch and talk about our function. We have a function here, and this function helps us visualize the performance of our classification model by creating a confusion matrix plot. And let's look at this part, CM S type, blah blah here. This times normalizes the confusion matrix to show percentages instead of raw counts. And let's look at the plotting the matrix part here. It plots the matrix with a color gradient for better visual distinction, and we will add some details, titles, axis labels, tick marks, and text annotations are added for clarity, and the plot.text part ensures that the colors is readable against the background. And let's switch and let's look at our another part and talk about it. We'll import warnings for the suppresses any warnings to keep the output clean. And let's look at these parts, labels. This line reads a file profile.txt containing labels for different components of a hydraulic system and assigns meaningful column names. And let's look at these parts, and here data part. It reads data from multiple files and appends them into a single data frame. And here print shape and TFF part, it prints the shape of the data frame and displays the first few rows to understand structure and contents of the data. And here's our data, and let's look at this output. The data frame has 8820 rows and 60 columns. Each row represents a cycle, and each column represents a time series observation from the sensors. And let's look at our data frame. Each row contains 60 observations from the temperature sensors measured during each cycle time, and these values represent the temperatures recorded at different time points within each cycle. And what we can say, let's switch and let's look at these parts. Here this line of code reshapes the data frame DF to prepare it for input into the neural network. And DF sort index, let's look at this part. It sorts the data frame by index and gets the underlying NumPy array. And let's look at the reshape -1 length data. Let's look at this and explain. It reshapes the array to have a new shape var, and -1 allows the first dimension to be inferred automatically, and length data corresponds to the number of the different files at left length df columns. Here it corresponds to the number of columns, and transpose 0 to 1. What is this? It reorders the dimensions of the array to match the expected input shape for the neural network. And here we have a output. This shape indicates that there are 2205 cycles, each with 60 time points, and data from 4 sensors. Here we have 4 sensors. And look at our visualization code and talk about it. This block of code visualizes the temperatures data from the first sensor across the 60 time points. And here plot figure, what happens here, it says the size of the plot, and df0, what that means, it plots the temperature data from the first cycle, and plot title, at title the plot label, the y label, and x label, I mean time. Here it adds the labels for x-axis as time and y-axis as temperature. And let's look at our plot and talk about it. Here original temperature data, y-axis temperature, x-axis time, and talk about it. What we can say here, the plot shows the temperature readings from the sensors over time for first time, and each line represents a different sensor, and the y-axis shows the temperature values, and the x-axis shows the time points 1 to 6 here within the cycles. And the temperature readings vary slightly over time, but generally follow a consistent pattern for each sensor, you can see. And the lines are relatively smooth, indicating stable temperature readings without abrupt changes. And I think it's enough, and let's switch and talk about the label parts. Here it extracts the color column from the label data frame and displays the count of each unique value in this column. And let's look at our output. There are 3 distinct conditions, as you can see here, for the color components, with 741 instances of 100 and 732 instances of 3 and 732 instances of 20 here last. And let's look at our mapping parts and talk about this block. Here we maps the categorical labels to integers and creates a reverse mapping dictionary for the interpretation, and it converts the labels to a one-hot encoded format. And let's look at our output. The labels are mapped to integers as follows, you can see here. And the reverse mapping allows us to convert back from integers to original labels if needed. The two categorical functions transforms these integers labels into one-hot encoded vectors. And let's split our data for train and test and talk about it. Here we split the data into training and testing sets, and the train test split function here, as you can see, it divides the data into training and testing subset, and the random state 42 here ensures reproducibility of the split. And let's scale our data and talk about it. First let's switch, okay. Here we scale the features to data to have zero mean and unit variance, and this standard scaler is here. used to normalize the feature data, and the fit transform here method is applied to the training data, and transform is here applied to the testing data. The reshape operations ensures the data is scaled correctly across all features, and I think it's okay. And let's look at our another part here. What happens here? Uh, First section here, set the parameters for the model, and let's explain them. Number of sensors in the data, first line, and time periods here, number of time steps in each sequence, and batch size, what is this? The number of samples per gradient update, and epochs here, number of times the entire dataset is passed through the model during training. And let's build our model and talk about that part. Let's begin. Here we construct a convolutional neural network for time series classification. And let's look at the convolutional 1D layers. It applies convolutional operations to extract features from the time series data. And max pooling one dimension, what is this? It reduces the spatial dimensions of the data, keeping the most significant features. And global average pooling one dimension, it reduces each feature map to a single number by taking the average. And dropouts, it helps prevent overfitting by randomly dropping units during training. And dense layer, uh, final layer with a softmax activation function to output probabilities for each class. And then we will compile our model, and let's look at this. Here we configure the model for the training. And what is loss? Loss uses categorical cross entropy as the loss function because it's a multi-class classification problem. And optimizer Adam optimizers Adam optimizer for efficient training. And metrics, it tracks accuracy during training and evaluation. And history, what happens in these lines, talk about this. It trained the model on the training data, and extreme Y-train, training data and labels, and batch size. It is the number of samples per batch, and epochs here, number of training epochs, and validation split 0.2. It is fraction of the training data to be used as validation data, and verbose here, verbose in mode for detailed logging. And what we can say in the output, what is the epoch? One complete pass through entire training dataset, and loss, training loss value, and accuracy, training accuracy, and well loss, what is this? Validation loss value, and well accuracy, it is a validation accuracy here. And what we can say here, the training loss decreases with each epoch, and indicating the model is learning. The accuracy is higher for both training and validation sets, showing that the model generalizes well to unseen data. And let's switch and talk again. Here, yes, model parts and evolution parts. Let's talk about these lines. What happens here? This size evaluates the trained model on the test data to assess its performance. And we have an output here, 14. What is this? It indicates the number of batches processed. And again, the loss value on the test data, which is 0.1. And accuracy, the accuracy on the test data, which is high, and 0.98, we can say. And we have an array here. What is this? The array contains the loss and accuracy values, as you can see here. And let's make some predictions and talk about these lines here. It uses the trained model to make predictions on the test data, and model dot predict here, I mean m dot predict. It generates predicted probabilities for each class, and np argmax, what is this here? It converts the predicted probabilities into class labels by taking the index of the maximum probability for each sample, and result test, I mean pred test contains the predicted class labels for the test data. And here let's talk about this. It prints the detailed classification report comparing the true labels to the predicted labels, and the true labels and predicted labels are mapped back to their original values using this reverse label, and the classification report function from scikit-learn matrix generates a report showing precision, recall, F1 score, and support for each class. And we have a report here, and let's talk about this. First, precision here, first column, the ratio of correctly predicted positive observations to the total predicted positives. And what is the recall? The ratio of correctly predicted positive observations to all the observations in the actual class. And F1 score, the weighted average of precision and recall. And what we can say here, the classification report indicates the excellent performance across all classes with high precision, recall, and F1 scores, demonstrating that the model is very effective at predicting the condition of the hydraulic components. And let's look at our CNF matrix code block and talk about this here. Here we create a confusion matrix to visualize the performance of the classification model, and y test parts here contains the true labels in a one-hot encoding format, which are converted back to their original labels using this reverse label here, and pred test here contains the predicted labels also converted back to their original labels, and confusion matrix, and talk about this here, I mean here, compares the true labels with the predicted labels and generates the confusion matrix. And here we can set our some parameters. You can change them. You can make them, for example, 10, 12, 20 nanometer. And what we can say, let's look at our confusion matrix, and let's explain our visual. What we can say, true label, predicted label, and let's look at here. 99% correctly classified as class 3, and 1% classified as class 20, and 0% as class 100, and class 20, 98% correctly classified as class 20, and 2% misclassified as class 3, and 0% as class 100. And here 100%, it 99% correctly classified as class 100, and 1% classified as class 20, and 0% as class 3. And what we can say about the performance, the high values on the diagonal indicate that the model is highly accurate in predicting the correct class, and the low values in the off diagonal elements indicate very few misclassification. And let's continue to other parts and talk about these two lines. Here we define a new model that outputs the embedding from the trained model at the layer named GAP1 dimension, I mean global average pooling 1 dimension. And let's talk about this. First, model inputs, model dot input, blah 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 here. Here we create a new model that shares the same input as model underscore m, but only goes up to the GAP one dimension layer. And here we can see our summary, embedding underscore model dot summary, and it brings the architecture of the model amp model, showing the layers and the output shapes. And what we can see here, and let's talk about it. First, convolutional one dimension input here, and convolutional one dimension again here. We can see parameters, out shapes, max pooling one dimension, convolutional one dimension, and two convolutional one dimension, 3 and GAP one dimension. And we can see our total parameters. I mean, all parameters are trainable. And here, let's look at this line series features. What is this? It used the embedding model to extract feature vectors from the test data. And what happens here, MBD model predict, it feeds the test data through the EMB model to get the output from the GAP one dimension layer, and the result series features contains the feature vectors for each test sample. And let's look at these lines and talk about this. You can ignore the warnings here. What happens here? These lines reduce the dimensionality of the feature vectors to 2 dimensions for visualization. And T, S, and E. What is this? T-distributed stochastic neighbor embedding. It is a technique for reducing the dimensions of high dimensional data while maintaining the structure of the data. And N components equal to, what is this? Reduces the data to 2 dimensions. And random state, you know that, and either here equal 300, number of iterations for optimization, and perplexity here. Finally, it balances the attention between local and global aspects of the data. And here we have a final line here, T equal blah blah. What happens here? Let's talk about this. Here T assign to the feature vectors and transform them into a two-dimensional space. And let's look at our final visualization part and talk about it. Here we create a scatter plot of the TSNE results, and again fixed size, and you can change the parameters. And here you can change the colors. It's no matter. And we will show our plots and talk about it. Here our final of the project and talk about it. What we can say here, each point in the scatter plot represents a sample from the test data sets, and the position of each point in the two-dimensional space is determined by the TSNE algorithm, which tries to maintain the relative distances and structure of the original high-dimensional data. And the colors represents different classes. I mean, red, class 3, and blue, class 20, and yellow, class 100. And what we can say here, points of the same color tend to cluster together, indicating that the model's features can distinguish between classes effectively. And the clusters are not perfectly separated, but show some overlap, which is common in high-dimensional data reduced to the dimensions. And this visualization provides insight into how well the model has learned to separate different classes based on the features extracted from the CNN. And thank you for listening. That's all for our CNN class. Thank you for attention, and see you in the next lesson.